Quintez Cephus, really like it. Big target guy. Think about how Juwan Johnson was getting those touchdowns in the end zone. Big guy. Cephus, he already did it last week. I think he could kind of do the same thing against the Packers. I really like Marshall developing here as kind of this big slot and end zone threat. Marshall, arrow up. Robbie Anderson, arrow down. Go ahead and try to trade him, whatever you want to do. Robbie Anderson. And pick up Terrace Marshall. Gerald Everett, tight end for Seattle. There's room for him to grow there. I know Disley's there too, but either way, he's new. He's a good player, I think. Again, there's room to develop beyond that. Pollard, I really liked what I saw out of him. I know it was a game script kind of thing against Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We've been saying it was game script and making that excuse for Zeke. Also not opposed to going out right now and trying to trade for Aaron Jones. Welcome to Next Week Tonight. Welcome back to Next Week Tonight, brought to you by Fusion Fantasy Football. I'm your host, Joshua, and this is the show that's going to keep you 1 week ahead of the competition. Let's get to it. Breakouts, you should be adding before everyone else sees them break out. All right. We're going to be talking about streamers for week 4 that you can have ready to go before everyone else is looking. You don't have to worry about waivers next week, and trades to be making before everyone else figures it out, either for or selling, whatever. It depends on the week here. We're already on week 4. That's right. You read it right. It says week 4 because we're a week ahead and it's next week. Now we're going to be reacting or pre-acting to this weekend's games, week 3. I just watched Thursday Night Football. That's the only week 3 game that's happened. So I'm going to be telling you some players I think you need to be getting before they show something this weekend. We're going to talk about all the people you should be adding at the first half of the show. Second half, we're going to recap some of the players from the last week, successes, failures, talk about who you should still be watching. There's still useful, applicable information there. A couple of those guys, one of them we saw tonight. So still very actually viable. And that one take, that one ad is actually looking much better after tonight than I had feared after the week 2 games. That's the kind of thing we're going to have here. Look, this is the kind of show where it can be really easy. I want to break it down here for a minute before we get into it. It can be really easy for me to go too safe. But safe doesn't help you guys. And I have to continually push myself to get on that edge of crazy, of, what am I thinking? What am I seeing that's making me think this player is going to be a breakout? And I have to keep that edge versus just trying to get names that are going to hit or look good that I can claim I'm smart about. Okay? Because for a lot of these guys, it's just about paying attention. There's not any fancy insights. It's just about paying attention. If you're paying attention, you're good. There are so fewer edges to find in fantasy football today. All the information's out there. Everyone has somewhere to go to find a list of waiver players for the week on Tuesday, right? Sit starts. There's so much more information out there. There's so much less edges and places to win. But I'll tell you where there is one. And one of the biggest, I believe, and it's what we're doing in this show here tonight. I know I'm not the only one who talks about players to add for next week before the games start. You can add them for free. There's lots of shows that have a segment where they talk about some players. This is the only show. Well, this is all I do. This is all I'm doing. All this week, I'm thinking about next week. All next week, I'm thinking about week 5. This is the entire lens. Now, there's lots of shows and places you can go to get all that stuff. I'm wearing tonight, our friends, Toilets to Titles. They've got all kinds of YouTube shows, everything from Sunday mornings, DFS, betting. If you want other kind of content, go check out their station, their channel. toilets to titles. I'm sometimes a guest on there, at least in the off season. We're all busy doing our thing. But again, this is one show where this is all I'm doing. And no one else is doing just this to the extent I'm doing, where I'm covering breakouts and streamers and trades. No one else is quite talking about trades. Now, there's some shows out there like JJ Zacharyson. He has the Late Round podcast, and he does a 15 transaction show, and he talks about players you should be making transactions for of some kind, and that can include trades. But that show is based on that week. In fact, I count it as a success if a player that I talk about here tonight shows up in his 15 transactions on Tuesday. That's a huge success in my mind. So far, we've had a couple of them already, so that feels really good. He talks about now sleepers and stuff later in the week. Feels really good when I've got guys on that list already. There's lots of other podcasts out there. I'm just saying this is all we do. So stick with us if you're new. Sorry for the long introduction. Just trying to get it out there and more people to see what we're doing here. It's the third year I've done it, guys. And we have the results to prove it's big. Because, like I said, it's not always going to be a high percentage hit. It's a bench guy. It doesn't have to be a high percentage hit, at least on the breakout guys I'm talking about. I try to get you good percentage hits on the streamers, okay, obviously. But for the stashes, for these breakout pre-action picks, look, it just is going to take one of them to hit it big. It takes one Chase Claypool to make it all worth it, right? It's just going to take one of those guys. And along the way, we can pick up value along the way, little bits here and there. We'll hit into that in the recap. Second half, we need to get into it. Last week's was too long, and we're headed there already, but I'm more prepared when we get to the names. So let's do it. Also, if you hear click, click, I'm sorry. I got a new mouse. I love the thing, but it has a little bit more click than my old one did. Oh, well. Breakouts. I'm going to talk about players, first of all. Before you add players, you're going to have to cut someone, right? So you want to go to the website, fusionffb.com, pull up the article I put out impromptu Monday. 9 players, 3 at each player position that you don't need to hold on to. Now, adjust for depth in your league, but very quickly, wide receivers, Russell Gage, he's out there, but he's not involved. And he even had a little bit of an injury. He's not even getting the air yards. That offense as a whole looks bad. In a normal, kind of traditional league, he doesn't need to be owned. It's a disappointment, but you don't want to hang on to players that aren't really going to help you. And you don't want to hold on to a player that's just kind of just sitting there. And the only reason you have him is the allure of them being a recognizable name and maybe the safety of you might be able to flex them for 6 to 8 points. That's holding you back from adding difference-making players that we're going to be talking about. All right? It's not going to help you. Russell Gage, Donovan Peoples-Jones, very similar story. He's out there. He's not doing anything. This one's difficult because the Browns have a bunch of injuries. We don't know if Odell Beckham will actually be back in week 3. Landry's on the 3-week IR. You probably want to look towards like Rashard Higgins or even Anthony Schwartz, who was a pickup last week. And then Austin Hooper, who should just be owned already, but make sure he is. Chester Rogers was somebody I named just because I wanted to make sure you didn't look at his target share and everything, because he had a huge week 1 as far as opportunity, but there's nothing there. Okay, it's just fluky numbers in a limited sample size with 1 or 2 weeks. That's all. Running backs, James Conner. I'm afraid James Conner is done. He's getting some of the work, but he's terribly inefficient with it. Whether that means he's just not getting the kind of work that is efficient, or whether he's declined, I don't know. And I don't really care about the difference, because there is no difference to my fantasy point, bottom line. Yeah, we'll come back around to there. Ronald Jones, similar situation. I thought Ronald Jones might be a more consistent bruising kind of role, seeing as how they had Giovanni Bernard, but it looks like neither Bernard or Jones are getting those definite roles as much. It's much more Leonard Fournette out there, playoff Lenny. Like I said, that also means Gio is just not being used as much as I hoped either. So Ronald Jones again, and these are in kind of priority within the position of fringe to of a league. It's more traditional, shallow to a deep league. Justin Jackson's the third name. Don't need to hang on to him. I mean, he's not even a true handcuff. Even if Eckler gets hurt, it's going to be pretty much split between him and probably Roundtree. So don't worry about it. Tight ends, big name, Mike Gesicki, but he hasn't done much. And this has been a major concern, a red flag for him for years. Even in college, athletic, but where's the production? His first year, no broken tackles. Very disappointing. You would hope to get more production out of what you're seeing, but unless he's being used as a slot receiver, he doesn't do much. And now there's better receivers and better slot receivers on the team than there were in the past, and it's pushing him out of being used in the passing game almost completely. Sell him if you can. These are not cuts. All of this whole list, these aren't just cuts. Trade them if you can. And he's definitely one you want to trade. Blake Jarwin in Dallas. Probably Dalton Schultz has beat him out. There's plenty of other tight ends to stash. You don't need to be wasting a spot on Blake Jarwin. The only upside to him is it's the same upside that Dalton Schultz had, and it's the law of conservation of tight end targets. I'm not a big vacated targets guy, but when it comes to tight ends, in season, unexpectedly, if someone gets injured, those targets seem to get consolidated within the one. It's the same target share, two tight ends, but now it's all on one player, at least one fewer. So unless there's an injury like last year where Dalton Schultz then got what Blake Jarwin was going to get plus his own, there's no use. Zach Ertz, also, it's over. He's not even being used ahead of Kez Watkins in opportunity share. Move on, okay? These guys are going to hold you back. So, with that said, players you can get rid of, like I said already, Austin Hooper, you got to make sure he's owned. Okay, Cleveland throws more to the tight ends over the last 2 weeks than any other team. Almost 45% of their target share has been to tight ends. They have three good ones: Harrison Bryant, David Njoku, and Austin Hooper. But Hooper is going to be the primary guy, the go-to move the ball type of guy. And Njoku is an interesting name to add as well. And he's going to be on here as he's a big play kind of guy. So that's who you want to look at. Check it out. Make sure those guys are owned, at least Hooper, and consider Njoku. Darnell Mooney must be owned. Probably already is. I got to say it. Justin Fields must be owned. And we'll come back around to this one. He was on my list for this week already before the season because I'd projected him to be starting week 4 against the Lions at home. It was the perfect setup. They had a tough matchup this week 3, I think, against Chicago, right? I mean, he's on Chicago. So he was matched up against Cleveland. All right. So the problem there is tougher game. That's why I thought he would be starting week 4. But injury to Dalton, here he is. He's starting this week. It's a week ahead of schedule. Now everyone else has already jumped on him. There's a couple instances like this where it's like, okay, shoot. Oh, well, we tried. Another name, Rashod Bateman, comes off the 3-week IR in week 4. Should be stashed. Should have already been in your IR slot. Go double check. Zack Moss. Just to back up, the way you do that is you drop your kicker, you drop somebody else you were going to drop anyway. You add Bateman, you put him in your IR, and then you add whatever other players you wanted to add. You have to do it in that order, right? Think ahead. Zack Moss also should be owned. I know he was inactive week 1. There's a question of whether that was a healthy, truly healthy scratch or not. And then he looked good in week 2, got a couple, lucky touchdown opportunities, converted, but was running hard. I trust him to become a lead back more than Singletary. Unfortunately, the Bills are throwing a ridiculous amount. But if that was to fall back at all, then I think Moss, if they need to have run out some games, the problem is the Bills don't typically do that. But again, if anyone's going to do it, it's Zack Moss. If anyone other than Josh Allen is going to run it in for a touchdown, I'd trust Zack Moss over Devin Singletary or even Breida. Okay, Matt Breida. All right, so the next one, we're starting to get, again, I should say it every time. I forget sometimes, I'm sorry. I do this in priority order. So we're working our way out to lower ownership, shallower league kind of players, okay? Michael Carter, Jets, running back. Very likely owned, but when it comes to running backs you could possibly get, there's not a ton of options. But Michael Carter is not a bad option as someone who just has the opportunity to do more. And he's being involved, even if his snap share is not huge. Let me look it up here. His opportunities he's getting and his opportunity share is surprisingly high for someone who has not been used, or at least has not had much more than 50% of the snaps, not even 50% of the snaps, okay? And yet he's at a 12.5% weighted opportunity share. So he's still getting work when he's in. Those efficiency numbers are encouraging. So I would stash him as someone who has an avenue, has a path to full-time work. That's an upside that most running backs you might possibly be able to pick up don't have. Okay, I'm going to move now. We already talked a little bit about Zack Moss on Buffalo, and I referenced it. Riddle me this, all right? The Bills are throwing more than just about anyone. Almost. They are passing it to wide receivers at a highest rate in the league. 78% of their targets, their pass attempts, go to wide receivers. Now, part of that's because they don't really have a tight end. They're one of the least tight end and pretty low in running back, like we talked about. Obviously, it has to be somewhere because it's all going to wide receiver. And yet, Diggs is the only one who's really owned. A lot of people had high hopes for Gabriel Davis. You might need to put that on the back burner, face reality, and realize that it's all Diggs, Beasley, and Emmanuel Sanders out there every week. 2 weeks. But they are the ones eating up the snap share. Gabriel Davis is below. He is at 42, almost 43% snap share. All the other guys are above 75. Diggs, of course, is way up there. And Emmanuel Sanders, 86% snaps. He needs to be owned. Go get them. I would add them in that order. Sanders first. He has the higher upside. His air yards are fantastic. He's just not completely converting, but he is getting 30% of the air yards market share, which is nearly tied with Diggs. All right. So big games are coming. And unfortunately for the running backs, like we referenced, the Bills are a team that they keep their foot on the gas. We just saw this last week, even then they are ahead on Miami by a lot. They kept at it. So there's going to be opportunities to score even if they're winning games. You need to own Emmanuel Sanders. If not him, I do like Cole Beasley. Just doesn't quite have that high upside with the high air yards and everything, but a very solid player. And then even Gabriel Davis if you're in a deeper league. All right. Because he is a talented player. He has been used. He does get used, last year at least, a lot in the red zone. So it'll be possibility of him working his way into more usage. But for now, Emmanuel Sanders is the guy. All right. Double check that these guys are also owned. Jalen Reagor, Philadelphia. Definitely the wide receiver 2 on the team. Smith, definitely opportunity, targets, snaps. Devonta Smith is the number 1. But Jalen Reagor has had multiple receptions called back. He had a touchdown called back, a big, long reception for a touchdown in week 2 called back. He's getting the opportunity. He seems to be playing well. He should be someone that you stash. I would own Emmanuel Sanders before Jalen Reagor. That's why I listed him before. But I probably wanted to add Jalen Reagor before the other Bills wide receivers. Just to clarify kind of where in the pecking order I have him. Jamison Crowder. Probably back this week. I know we've been keeping an eye on Elijah Moore, but there's plenty to take away from Braxton Berrios, and Crowder is the veteran player. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out in week 3. They played Denver. The Jets played Denver week 3. Not an easy matchup. So it'll be a fun one to add him on your bench. Watch and see if he is playing well and is involved. He can even be a streamer in week 4 playing Tennessee, whose defense is giving up some of the most points out there. Partly because their offensive scoring, forcing the other team to also try and score points, but also then they can because the Titan defense is pretty bad. So Jamison Crowder out there. He's been injured, so good chance he is sitting out there. I need to apologize. Last week, I did not mean to make it sound like you should not be owning Zach Pascal on the Colts. I specifically said that he's not the team's wide receiver 1, that someone else is going to step up, probably Pittman. And I said, even if Pittman is the guy, there's still room for another, at least until Hilton gets back. And then I started talking about the other options, Paris and Mike Straken. And I should have named and include Zach Pascal in that. And I'm sorry. I like Pascal. My whole point was I just don't like him as a wide receiver 1. He can be that wide receiver 2. That's what he has been. And that's perfect. That's perfect. So I apologize if I misled. You easily could have added him. Demetric Felton on the Browns. We've talked about a bunch of Browns players already. This is a deep, high upside stash. Very interesting player. Played wide receiver some in college, but then was also running back and then went into the combine. As a running back. So very interesting player. Got in after all the injuries. Even though he's a rookie who's seemingly way down any kind of depth chart, came in when there was injury and is getting work. The coaches talked how much they like him. Obviously, he made the team. When he's in, he's getting work and he's being efficient with it. Obviously, it's like 2 targets or something, and then a few rush attempts. But he is an interesting player that I would want to stash. See how he does when there's opportunity because of other players missing. It's a bad matchup, but I would just want to see him. And if he does something, I want him on my bench. So this, again, all these guys from here on out are complete stashes, all right? Maybe, again, you see someone be a healthy scratch or maybe an injury pregame or something like that, move that player into your IR, pick up these stashes, okay? Next guy, Luke Farrell. So O'Shaughnessy was getting a crazy amount of opportunity in Jacksonville, tight end. But then he got hurt in end of week 2. He's going to be out for a while. O'Shaughnessy wasn't exactly, I would say, a exciting prospect, and yet he's getting all that work. So how much of that was just scheme, demand? I don't know. I kind of like O'Shaughnessy. I know I'm going all the way back to when he came into the league with the Patriots, bounced around from there. If O'Shaughnessy was doing it, then I would like to see what happens if Luke Farrell gets that chance. A little more athletic guy. I just stash. All right, that's all we're talking about here. Last guy on the stash is Eno Benjamin, running back, Cardinals. Now the Cardinals are probably not going to be a good source of running back points. Plain and simple. However, like we said, James Conner, done with him. So the question is, at what point do they move on from him? At what point is he going to get injured? We know he's injury prone. Very few players I'll actually say that about, but he is. Chase Edmonds is doing good, efficient with what he's getting, but he's not getting the kind of traditional running back work as much as Conner. So if Conner was to be replaced by someone, it would be Eno Benjamin. This offense is scoring points. Again, this is a true stash. I just would love to see him actually get an opportunity one of these days. And if James Conner is ever out for a game because of injury, even if it's just for 1 week, Eno Benjamin's going to be the guy to get that opportunity. All right? Okay. We're going to move into streamers. Week 4 streamers. So all the guys I just talked about are guys that we want to be adding before week 3 games, before everyone gets excited about them and goes to actually spend fab money, use a waiver spot, and you don't know you can get them. But you can get them now for free. All right, those were the breakout guys. Now we're talking streamers. Players that we hope will actually put up real points. Now, for quarterback, referenced him already, Justin Fields. He's playing Detroit week 4. This is when I thought he would have his first start. Maybe this is even better when it comes to week 4 production because I'll have a game to be out there as the starter. Come out week 4 a little bit more comfortable, full couple weeks of preparation as the starter, and going against a bad Detroit secondary. That could be beautiful. He is a must start in week 4. So again, make sure you have him owned. Sam Darnold played, unfortunately, Thursday night, so you can't add him now. But keep in mind he plays Dallas in week 4. Interesting guy. Keep an eye on. After waivers run, you can swoop in, add him for free. Running back, Nyheim Hines. First of all, with the current Colts quarterback situation, they might be running some combination of Eason and Hundley this week 3. That's going to be ugly. I think that might be a good game script for Nyheim Hines. So double check that he's owned. He should be owned already, but you got to check. This is similar to Tony Pollard last week. You got to check. Okay. He might have a really good game despite it being a really ugly game in week 3. And then in week 4, again, they play Miami. But again, these seem to be the kind of matchups where Hines actually gets used. All right. A little more out there, but Damian Williams, backup running back. But he's not really the backup. He is getting involved in the passing game for the Bears. And so I like him as just shoot your shot kind of flex or somebody you need to put in your RB2 spot because of injuries. Christian McCaffrey, I don't know if he's going to miss some time. Obviously, you want to add Chuba Hubbard, unsaid, so I don't say it here. Damian Williams getting involved in that, a little bit of a Tariq Cohen role, but he's also the backup for Montgomery. And then should an injury happen to Montgomery, guys, you always want to stash a handcuff. Okay? So I mean, I'd already talked about stashing Demetric Felton, Eno Benjamin. If you have room to stash any random player, it could have been Chuba Hubbard, anybody, before the games start, and you can move players around and have an empty spot, you want to be stashing running backs. Unless you have a particular player you think is going to do something, like we're talking about wide receivers, the running back can be a terrible sounding backup, but if he's a handcuff, his upside is overnight starter, and at worst case, you can just trade him away, okay? It's the same reason why from, whenever you drafted until the start of the season, you should have just been stashing all kinds of these running backs. You could have had Tyson, Tony Jones is one there in the Saints. He was actually getting decent usage when it's not Kamara. It's Tony Jones. So I guess we can add him. But anyway, you stash backups, handcuffs, in between whenever the games are about to start and you have room, okay? And Damian Williams qualifies. Wide receivers, in week 4, we already talked about the Bills wide receivers, and you're going to want to start one of them against Houston week 4. Terrace Marshall, we just saw Carolina, and this is the guy I was kind of referenced earlier when I said he was a pick in week 3's show. And the results of that were, I don't know. But after seeing now Thursday Night Football week 3, I really like the pick even more. Terrace Marshall's getting more involved. Robbie Anderson getting less involved. So I was a week ahead of myself, basically. All right. So that's a perfect pick. Terrace Marshall, make sure you pick him up. You can start him possibly week 4 against Dallas. Bad secondary. Their offense pushes the other team to push. And Terrace Marshall's a big target in the slot and in the end zone. Tight end, Austin Hooper. Again, we talked about it. Minnesota is going to be a much tougher opponent, though, than the Bears in week 3. So in week 4, they're going to have to score points because Minnesota likes to score points. But Minnesota's defense is also weakened by injury. Maybe that'll be a little bit better come week 4. But this is why I was saying start Rondale Moore to people last week, because Minnesota had all that injury. Meanwhile, their offense is putting up points. It's perfect recipe for everyone to have fantasy points. And then for tight end, Trautman or Juwan Johnson. So Adam Trautman or Juwan Johnson, one of the Saints tight ends against the Giants. Interesting. I think attainable players that you can stream, and you just need one of them to hit. And I think that's the kind of game, again, where, Giants have been getting up points to tight end. Those trends aren't very strong yet, but their offense is being productive. So again, they're going to still be pushing the other team. All right. That's it for streamers. I got you 2 at each of the 4 positions, guys. I feel pretty happy about that. Sometimes I talk about kicker and defense. There weren't any defenses that really popped out to me for week 4 as obvious. I will just say that we are getting to the time of year where defenses aren't what you thought they were going to be necessarily. So this goes for all of the streamers. You can't just go off of preseason perception on whether a defense is good or bad and so on. There's been injuries. There's been just misevaluation. The teams are trying to tell us who they are. Week 3 is a big deal for this because going into week 4 now, I have 3 weeks of data to look at. That's my minimum. Even then, I don't like it because week 1 and then even 2 is a wild card because it's the first games of the year. Once we get to week 5, I'll start trusting the trends as far as points against on defenses for positions. But we can start at least looking at it after this week. That's it for streamers. We're going to move on to trades. And people might not like this one. They usually don't. Sell Tyler Higbee. Some people are saying buy him. My issue is Tyler Higbee already has 100% snap share. And his involvement in passing in routes is not as high as you'd want it to see, and it's not going up. If anything, it went down in week 2. Week 1, he had incredible usage and had a decent game. I'm afraid it's all downhill from there. I'm not saying it's going to be bad. I'm just saying if you can sell with someone still having that week 1 potential, what we saw from him in week 1, you might get something good out of it. I mean, you might be able to trade him for some of these other players we've been talking about. Hopefully not players you can add. I'm talking about good players, all right, that have actually done something already, and therefore they're already owned. And then I'm going to say trade Gronk. It's hard. Look, if you're a contender, just write it out. Okay, great. But if you're not, or if you are, but you have other options, go ahead and trade him for as much as you can. I mean, even go try to trade him and something for Kittle, okay? Because Kittle, I have concerns for Kittle, but I think he'll still be better than what he's been. Gronk's at a high peak right now. It's kind of obvious. I try not to be too obvious with these. I try to be a full week ahead, even in the perception and the reasoning. I could say, go buy Saquon Barkley now. Last chance before he plays Atlanta and has a big game. Yeah, I mean, you should have been thinking about that last week. And I didn't really bring it up because Saquon, what I've said the entire time was eased in for the first month. You're not drafting him to win you games in the first month. I've been starting him because he has that potential, and no one else I had that potential or had a floor to balance it. And so I still was starting him. Got a few points. Better days are coming. But like that situation, I'm not going to wait until the week of to say something. This is about next week. So I don't have much more than that. That's it for week 4. Let's quickly talk about a recap. I put out a thread on Twitter. Follow me at FusionFFB. And I went one by one. I didn't focus on fantasy points. Maybe I should have when I got to the streamers. But let's talk about it. Let's go through who hit, who I'm standing by, who you can maybe ignore for a while. Let's go. All right. First one I said was add Marquez Valdes-Scantling. I think that was a hit. He just didn't produce. He has so much air yard market share. He has high, like 20% target share. Rodgers overthrew him wide open, long, twice, and threw it behind him wide open in the end zone. It's really frustrating. I don't know. I can't think of any other situation in recent history where the quarterback and a wide receiver are like so completely, I don't know, if it's truly a disconnect, then we shouldn't be buying him because it's just not going to be. But what if they finally connect? What if they finally get it together? And I know you say, well, it's been 3 years. How many years did it take for Adams? 3 years. All right. So just saying, I still like it. I still stand by this as a fairly deep league, but it doesn't even have to be too deep. If it's a 12-teamer with 16, 20-man roster, he definitely should be owned. Okay. I also said pick up Elijah Moore, which I'd started the week before. I just was sticking with it. And we saw that. This was a hit. Now he's out there still getting the snaps he was getting before, but now he's getting the air yards. Now he's actually getting the targets. Still coming along. All right. We also talked about adding and even streaming Quintez Cephus. Of course, week 3. I wasn't telling you stream in week 2, but I did say I thought he could have a good game against the Packers, much like Juwan Johnson. Seemed like the big guys were scoring against him. And right off the bat, first drive, I almost missed it. It happened so quick. Quintez Cephus. He showed up throughout the rest of the game with Tyrell Williams being out. He's just a good interesting and I think good player. You hope he would come down with a couple of those big contested passes because that's kind of his thing, right? But Goff is actually throwing it downfield and giving him those opportunities. And no one's throwing it more than Detroit. And part of that is because they're losing. I should say they're third in pass rate, but they have the most pass attempts. Okay, to clarify. And they also have the highest weighted opportunity as a team combined. And they're also, by the way, throwing to running backs more than any other team. Hello, DeAndre Swift. But it's still great for the receivers. If they continue getting junk time, they're going to continue to have to push it downfield and try to score. Look, Goff was able to, they had a good defense when he was with the Rams. Still do. That was able to hide Goff. He was able to be conservative. And yeah, he was not great throwing to the outside in the past. But if we're in a situation where Goff is forced to throw it downfield, I think he's still bad at it, but it's going to be opportunities and it's going to be positive points for the receivers. I think it's bad for the NFL. I think Goff's going to Goff, fumble, run out, try to run out around and get sacked for a loss. You saw it. Okay, we watched that game. Goff's going to Goff. But it can still be productive fantasy points for the receivers. Okay. Hawkinson, solid. Top 5 week in, week out, right? All right. After Cephus, we talked about adding Terrace Marshall. Referenced that earlier. Robbie down, Terrace up. And I even labeled here kind of a snoozer for now. Still wanted to keep an eye on him. Fair enough. All right. So that's a hit. Anthony Schwartz, add him. He didn't do much in week 2. He had nice looking week 1. Not much week 2. But now we have injury to Landry. We're not sure about Odell. So there might still be opportunity. This was probably a miss. At least now, keep watching it. I think the Chicago game is going to be interesting because he could have encouraging numbers but no production. But again, week 4, Detroit. Week 4, Dallas. I got to double check these things. I'm sorry. Week 4, Cleveland against Minnesota. I'm talking about all the players that they were playing instead of them. Sorry. Yeah, so they're playing Minnesota again. We already talked about this. They're going to be pushing it. That's the game I'd want to see Anthony Schwartz getting some big plays in. All right. So not a huge hit, but very interesting. Keep an eye on it. Gerald Everett. Add Gerald Everett. So it doesn't look good, but he doubled his routes. He's out there for almost twice as many, 86% snap share. This is very, very encouraging. If a team ever finally just decides to say, I'm sorry, you can't throw it deep, Tyler Lockett. And we're also going to be doubling DK Metcalf. I mean, I don't know how you can do that, but if a team ever decides to focus on stopping deeper passes, Everett's going to thrive underneath it. Simple as that. It's not going to be a week in, week out role, but he's going to have his weeks. Simple as that. Disley lost production, no targets week 2. Everett's getting into the system. He's going to be the guy. Unfortunately, doesn't mean he's going to be the guy every week. He just means that he's going to be their tight end 1. All right. Moving on. So anyway, I think that's a hit. Everyone was talking about it. And again, I love when I see Twitter on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. I love when I'm listening to podcasts and they're talking about who he should be adding, who had surprising weeks and is interesting. And it's these guys. It's Cephus. It's Gerald Everett. I love it. Add Broncos. And I named KJ Hamler and Albert Okuibunam. Right? Getting deep here. Hamler didn't really do anything. Disappointed. But Albert did get a couple targets, couple receptions, 4 for 4 actually, for 24 yards. Interesting. Sutton went off completely. Maybe Teddy's just completely locked in on him now. But I think there's opportunity here. And Denver does throw to the tight ends as a whole a decent amount. That's because they have both Fant and Albert. And Albert is a good option to stash. Add Colts secondary receivers was the other one I said. This was pretty much a miss. Paris was inactive. Strachan did nothing. And Pittman really stepped up. Got double-digit targets. And Pascal was the second guy. And I think can absolutely continue to be. So that was a miss. I didn't name that and make that clear. I brought up these other guys' kind of stashes before the pre-games. But I should have been more clear. Tyrod Taylor's the next guy, week 3, and also said Daniel Jones. Taylor's out a few weeks, so scratch that. We just saw Davis Mills trying to start for the Houston Texans, and it was encouraging at times and typical what you'd expect others. So probably not going to be adding him. Daniel Jones then in a 1 QB league is a completely viable play that you can pick up and play depending. I mean, if you don't have a top 6 or 7 traditional quarterback, top guys, Kyler, Josh Allen, Tom Brady now, right? Rodgers, Russell Wilson, obviously Mahomes. Didn't even mention him, did I? And last one probably is Dak. All right, and there's about 6 guys or so, 7 there, with the older guys. So those are the guys I would play ahead of them. But then when it starts to be like Jalen Hurts or Daniel Jones, it's completely about the matchup to me. All right, and he's going to have a great matchup in week 3. So go ahead and try and stash him now because you're probably not going to have a chance later. And the Giants play the Saints week 4. That's not a terrible start. Week 3, add and stream Tony Pollard. This was just kind of a make sure thing, and you can get him in your starting lineup. Sure enough, outdid Zeke. Trades. I said trade for Aaron Jones, and yeah, it was obvious, but it had to be said that any opportunity for that is now gone. I said trade for Antonio Gibson, sticking by it. I think it's somewhere between what we saw week 1 and week 2. And then trade for Javonte Williams. This one, everyone was talking about Tuesday, Wednesday, because he didn't have the big game, but he had another encouraging game, better efficiency on the ground, still 50-50 snaps. It's coming, guys. It's going to continue to come. And as a part of this, I wanted to make clear, sell Melvin Gordon, okay? So it's a buy Javonte, sell Melvin. Hope that's clear. All right, so as a whole, of the picks that I would actually count, 5 and 4, so 5 of them to the 9 were pretty much hits and we're happy with. I can't remember if I included Terrace in that total at all. It's probably 6 and 4 now, but pretty happy. That was actually a great week last week. When you think about it, if you can land on Cephus and Pollard and why am I blanking on the other? We were continually on Elijah Moore and then, and Gerald Everett, and seeing that growth in usage, even if he didn't get the targets. People are picking up on it. They're talking about it. Hey, and you see the tweets. Hey, Everett's got more snaps, got more routes. He's a sneaky ad this week. He was a sneakier ad last week. So keep watching, keep following. Let me know. I put out a tweet. I said, let me know who your next week tonight guy is. Because I want you guys thinking in this process. I had a great comment from Beryl talking about that. He just liked that the show and being in the next week process forced him to be more prepared, to look ahead. to think about matchups ahead of time and players and then trades. There's so many more of those opportunities and chances than I can even talk about when it comes to the trade section. And we're going to get more and focus on those more as we get into the season. The streamers and the trades become more important as we get into the middle of the season. Of course, we're going to have first bye weeks. What is it, week 5? So actually, it might be later this year. I'm blanking. But the important part right now is we're really trying to get these players that are hitting before everyone catches on. So that's why I'm focusing on breakouts early in the season. Then we'll really focus on streamers once we get into the buys of the season, and then trades as we're trying to get you prepared for the playoff run. 50 minutes. We went long again, but we covered a lot. And I think the first part for week 4 did not go too long. So we just had a very extensive recap. Thanks for joining me, guys. Be following on Twitter because, again, anything that comes up, at least follow the hashtag Next Week Tonight. I'll be putting out updates. Sometimes I have thoughts about before the week, the Thursday night games. I did that last week with Sterling Shepard. This week I didn't really have particularly much. Next week, who knows? All right, so just follow at FusionFFB. If you have any questions, you have ideas about trades, DM me. They're open. Email me, fusionffb@gmail.com, and check out the website. Like I threw up those players that you can drop thing impromptu last week. You never know when you're going to see that up there. And I might even be looking to put Next Week Tonight kind of recaps or summaries on the website. Okay. But follow, keep watching, keep grinding. This is where we find our edge. It really does and really will help you win. All right. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you guys next week.